Welcome to Talking School Sport. I'm joined today by rugby coach Ben Ryan. Almost 4 years now, Ben, since you led Fiji to the first ever gold medal in the Olympics. Does it feel like a long time?
Yes, a lot's happened since then. It feels even longer since we first met, and you were mentoring me, and we were doing what I was assistant coach to you at Southwest Schools. Is that right?
Under 18.
Under 18's January. We did the January team, so we didn't get the nod for the bigger September first team back then. But yeah, no, that was happy. I learned so much in those formative years as a teacher.
And are you still involved in sevens?
Kind of, not a lot. I mean, I work for HSBC as an ambassador, so we get involved in a few things around the World Series. I'm a consultant for the French Federation, so that covers everything really, but also men's and women's sevens and top 14 stuff. So I dip in and dip out a little bit, but not particularly.
Have you got any thoughts on the sevens situation at the moment? It's obviously in abeyance, and do you see it coming back?
Yeah. For elite level, I think we talked about this off air beforehand. It's one thing getting Man United to play Liverpool behind closed doors, and it's another thing to get 16 men's teams and 12 women's teams from around the world in a venue where it's packed with people drinking for 12 hours a day for 2 or 3 days. It's going to be one of the last cabs off the rank, I think, as far as professional sport is concerned. I know they're trying to get something started pre-Christmas. I think they'll try to get in about half a dozen tournaments before the Tokyo Olympics in the summer, if that goes ahead. So it's going to be a while now for rugby sevens to come on, and I think they're going to have to look at how they mould that, because we were talking about having a second division for World Series, and I think you're going to have to regionalize things now and have maybe a couple of leagues that are regional, Europe and Americas and Africa, Oceania, and do it a little bit like that, or something around that, maybe Africa and Europe.
Is that a step back for sevens?
I think they could. No, I think they could use it as an opportunity to make it better. They've been caught between a rock and a hard place on what they want out of sevens. Do they want it just to be a great weekend where people can turn up, have a load of beers, have a lot of fun, and watch a lot of sevens? Or do they want something that's actually TV will buy? Because at the moment they won't. And if it's going to be medium term, long term sustainable, they have to have more income coming in, because you're not going to attract better players. You're not going to get more people in. So I think it's given them a chance to recalibrate, look at it all, slim it all down, have a package that can be more marketable as far as earn more money from TV, and then that can go back into the game, back into the unions, filter down into the rest of the sevens game, and start to deliver some of the promises that we thought we'd get post Rio as far as this big spike in sevens. It hasn't really happened at elite level, but I think maybe this will give us a chance to do that.
Has it disappointed you that it's panned out that way? Did you hope for more?
Yeah, I did hope for more. I thought the sevens post Rio, because it really did. I mean, I think it was over 40% of even the UK's 18 to 30 population watched the Rio final live on telly, and that was just in the UK. We got the IOC gave us team performance of the year, and it then got rubber stamped to be a permanent sport. So everything got set up perfectly, and the women's tournament was brilliant. And then we never really drove on the back of that. And the reasons were because we had a product at World Series level that you couldn't sell to TV, and so it never caught on. Now, if we had a much shorter format, then I think things would have kicked on a little bit, a bit more knockouts, a bit shorter. I mean, I can sit at home and watch Dubai Sevens. I can watch 4 hours of it. I might not even see the team that I want to watch play, and when I do see them play, I'm not even sure what's happening, if they win or lose, and that doesn't work then, because it's got to be if we want it to be a bigger game. Maybe we don't. Maybe we just want it to be a nice small, more Olympic sport type game where it's more spectator based, and the players are becoming more semi-pro. But that's quite difficult when they have to dedicate a lot of their time to travelling around the world playing sevens.
Mm-hmm. It must have been an extraordinary occasion that day, in the final, which I thought redefined what was possible in sevens. What did you learn from that whole Fiji adventure?
I learned, oh crikey, a lot more than I can probably put down into words now. If I was to give it the headlines, Neil, I suppose I talk about it a lot. Like, and you knew me when I was starting up as a coach, and you're really enthusiastic. You're doing things without perhaps thinking through the consequences of it, and there's a lot of energy about when you start your coaching journey and for me that was a teacher and then as a professional coach. And I use this analogy that I had, like I was on a bike, like a really, really rubbish bike. It's only got a few gears, doesn't look very flash, not particularly great to cycle, but I was in control. And if there was a bump in the road or something to avoid, I might hit it, but I'd learn how to avoid it next time, or I'll swerve around. And as I kind of went through to better schools, better teams, divisional schools, semi-pro coaching, pro coaching, international coaching, that bicycle changed into a bigger and bigger vehicle until it became a big juggernaut at Twickenham that goes really fast in one direction. You're not at the front driving it. You're at the back somewhere, and you don't feel you're in control. You don't feel you're part of the process, and you forget about why you started coaching in the first place. And that's where I was. And then I went to Fiji, and Fiji had no money. They had no resources. I didn't get paid. I was way out of my comfort zone. They spoke Fijian, but they had this talent. And it reminded me again of molding that individual, getting the best out of a kid, best out of a player. And so I went back to basics really. And I needed that reset because I'd become a pretty average. I'd become although I think creatively and do things differently, I also became quite one of those boring professional rugby coaches that just thought they were better than they were and got too involved in other stuff rather than the actual coaching. So Fiji gave me my reset button, really.
Brilliant. That's and thinking back to those days in schools, which must be getting on for 20 years ago now, I would have thought.
Yeah.
The game obviously was a different thing in schools in those days. Nowadays, there's fewer people play it, much more concern for injury. Do you think the game's become more dangerous?
Oof, yeah. I mean, it's become dangerous for one reason, really, that people have more opportunity. Well, two things. They've got bigger, and the laws haven't protected the game from making that a point of difference. So if you've got bigger now with the laws, keeping the ball at the breakdown, you're more likely to keep the ball without having to show much skill and have a bit more blunt force trauma. And that is being replicated at the top end. So you're watching teams playing 25 plus phases by throwing in 100 kilogram plus forwards horizontally into breakdowns to win the ball. No art really into it. But they're telling us that this is a great game because of the continuity. But when that continuity is forged from no skill and just throwing grenades at breakdowns, that's going to go into what type of player we're providing. And so we're getting these younger players that are getting more physical. They understand training better, so probably a 15, 16-year-old's understanding of sports science and recovery and stuff would have been the same as a first year undergraduate back in my day. It's doing sports science at Loughborough. So, that information's out there on how to look after and make yourself bigger. And all those things have sort of collided to make the game a more dangerous one. And most of it is figured around the tackle and the breakdown. I don't actually think the tackle, if they get the tackle right and teach the tackle right, I don't think that's necessarily a problem, because we've always had a game where a good littling can tackle a big lad if technique's right. But the breakdown has changed. It isn't about skill anymore. And you can go into a breakdown and come out with a season-ending injury and you haven't done anything and you can't avoid it. And we need to stop that.
Is that the thing you'd change to make the game safer?
Yeah, that's the number one thing that I would look at to change. I wouldn't try necessarily to play around with. I know New Zealand and others have played around with changing weights for age group and all that sort of stuff, but that doesn't necessarily get away with actually the crux of what's going on and the fundamentals. And the fundamentals for me are the breakdown, that people aren't on their feet. People are coming off their feet to clear a ruck. That how a ball's produced is really just by blasting someone out of the way, and we need to add more art into this. And my view has always been like, have a guiding principle or something. So if we've got a law around the breakdown, then it has to be applied or retained if it makes the game better and it makes the game safer. And if it doesn't do either, then we don't use it. And there are so many laws in the game at the moment that, for me, don't tick that box of making it better or making it safer. And they need to be erased so we can get a game that's better across the board. And for world, not necessarily World Rugby, but the unions and the Premier and the Premiership and all the other top leagues, to start to realise that the game is far bigger than the top end of professional rugby. That's 2 or 3%. The majority of the game is played amateur and is played age group, and it will eventually bite the top end if we don't get this right now.
Do you think the top end of the game has had a bad influence on the school game and the community game?
Well, you've got your Keno coaches that will just think best practice is whatever their local Premiership club is doing, and so if they're watching their Leicester just smash people at breakdowns and judo roll them, sending 12s up channels with cleared out by 4, putting high balls in and playing a territory kicking game, then the coach thinks he's going to do exactly the same, and especially if he's involved in the EPDG or something like that, where he's going to want to impress and show people, oh, we're doing it the Leicester way. I mean, and Leicester, that's that I'm just using them as an example. I'm not saying they're particularly different to anyone else. So yeah, you watch it and you copy it, and that's been going on for as long as TV sport's been live on TV, that people have aped what's going on at the top, thinking that's best practice. And it's not always the case.
And back in the day when the school sevens season was about 2.5 weeks long and finished up taking your chance on Wimbledon Common, do you think there's a bigger role for sevens in the school game now?
Yeah, there definitely is. Like a kid's easily in my top 5 memories in rugby across everything I've done is schoolboy sevens. Easily, and I wouldn't just say it's one particular moment. It's that whole getting up in the morning, getting all your stuff ready to go away for a day to Brecon, to play 8 games over a day, where you're trying to get through the day. You're winning and losing against teams you've never played before. You've got parents that you can hang out with and get a bit more understanding about them and the kids. You're trying to find the boiler room at the school so you can stay warm between games. All of that stuff. You're playing a game and then someone's telling you you're on in 10 minutes over the road for another game. I used to love that. I thought it was just brilliant, and you hang out with other coaches and just that whole. I think that's one of the purest forms of, in my view, rugby. And Rosslyn Park was, like you said, was the I guess was the pinnacle up for it, because you'd go to Wimbledon College or Wimbledon Common or Richardson Evans or wherever you were playing on a postage stamp pitch full of mud, where conversions were given that were miles wide of the mark, often all sorts of things that you'd feel like you were unfair, and then you won or lost, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. And so when I was England coach, I'd obviously go down to watch Rosslyn Park to connect with as many people, and just see what talent's out there and just chat and try to get a feeling on the barometer, I guess, of sevens in the country. And I wanted to semi-formalise it. So I wanted to get all the big existing tournaments and try to have a bit more of a national sevens circuit, so that you could play regional games, regional tournaments. No one had to suddenly change their formats, and they could get points and feed into a national championship at Rosslyn Park, and then from there, perhaps they were doing that around the world, and you'd have a world schools finals at different age groups in Hong Kong, and HSBC were on board with that as well at the time, and unfortunately then things went south in my last year with England, and that idea never came through. But I think we do need to add a little bit, because there's so much going on, and then they kind of go, right, where's England sevens pathway now? Well, there isn't one. You finish schoolboy sevens and you might want to play it, even if it's part-time with a job in the city or something else, but you can't. There's nothing really. There's a bit of invitational sevens, but there's no real pathway. And guiding principles, 16-year-old kid, you should be able to answer the question. If he says, how do I get to play for England sevens? You should be able to answer that question. And if you can't, then your pathway's not right. And they can't answer that at the moment. They couldn't answer it when I was when I was coach, and we were trying to put things in place, but none of that happened. It suspended, and we were also going to bring in rugby league as well, and that was also going to happen. And unfortunately, that's not transpired either.
Does it surprise you that it's not taken off as a community game in the same way, where it's possibly better suited to lower intensity, more social, better suited to does that surprise you that it's never become a big thing in the club game?
Well, one of the things is like the Sevens community game is basically mostly invitation teams, so they're not attached formally, certainly, to clubs. And I think if they had maybe looked at the season, and then you could say my local club Richmond, you could be a 15s member, or maybe you could be a Sevens member or a touch member, and so the clubhouse is open all year round. I know some clubs will have cricket and that becomes a difficulty, but you might be able to do it so that Richmond then become Sevens and at different age groups and tag and stuff, and you play midweek. And you can have community matches and tournaments so that Richmond join out at Roslyn Park, and Kingston and Teddington and Twickenham and the other teams, and you have local midweek jamborees, mini tournaments. And I could really see that being really adding benefit to a club, because your first 7 could be playing in the same tournament alongside the under 16s tournament, and so you're crossing over lots of barriers in that club. So people are talking and it's just becoming tighter. I think that could happen. We did, again, another project that we wanted with England Sevens was to do that, to have this kind of 24/7 Sevens, they called it, where you had these regional local hubs, and then you built up to a national clubs championship. And there is a set of tournaments, but it's not formal. It's not done what it's supposed to have done, really. That's that. I can see why it's happened. Plus, Sevens is it's hard to do if you're not fit. So it's a knackering sport, and that's one of the reasons why I got involved with Rugby X, because it's really simple, and you don't need to be fit to play Rugby X at community level. So you could easily chuck that in and have that as a good development or off season or summer variation that clubs could use and generate income and bring in players.
Tell us a bit more about Rugby X then, Ben.
Yeah, so I was on a World Rugby panel that was deciding. People were pitching various ideas about various things, and the guys from Rugby X came and pitched this idea that was indoor rugby with inflatables around the corner and around the sides, so there was no touch lines, and you just smashed into the inflatables, carried on playing. It would have, I'm sure, been a lot of fun. It would have also been highly dangerous. And not everybody's got 100 meters worth of inflatable at hand to play the game. So we said no to them. And then they got in touch with me and said, why don't you come on board and be a consultant? Let's see if we can get this to a variation of the game that World Rugby will accept. And that's what happened. And we, again, worked around some guiding principles around, we want to retain the spirit of rugby. We want to have pass, catch, tackle, and decision making as core, and we wanted to have it fun, and we wanted it to be able to be coached and refereed by somebody that's never played the game, to make it super simple. So it went like that. We launched it in October at international level at the O2. It was live on ITV. It got 20 times the amount of people watching on TV that Dubai Sevens did, and we're not competing with Sevens, but it was a new crowd. It was young kids and it was women that were watching. They enjoyed it, and the plan was then to run it out as a grassroots as well as an international version of the game, going into inner cities and non-rugby playing communities to help rugby grow. But I also think it would be brilliant as a summer community arm for clubs, just to get people using clubs, playing, and bringing new people in without having to worry them about the safety issues, because it's a smaller pitch. You can't get the momentum you can swap on, swap off. There's no live kickoffs or live scrums or live lineouts. So it's the injuries were very much lower than you'd get in 7s or 15s.
Do you think the game's going to have to come up with creative solutions like that to maintain its appeal?
Yeah, because I know I like going to Twickenham and it's around the corner. It lacks a little bit of that pizzazz maybe that I like, that maybe some traditionalists don't like, but you've only got to look to your left and your right, and the average age is in their 60s and 70s of people at Twickenham. And sponsors are becoming, insurance agents and life insurance agents, and soon it will be funeral directors, and we've got to change that if we want the sport to survive. And that means bringing in new supporters and new fans and making it a product where there's so much competition normally for spending your money on live events. And so we've got to have a point of difference. And I think just make it a bit simpler. We got a law book at the moment that definitely, it's not. It's in the fiction section of the bookshop, because you look at the laws, it doesn't actually reflect what's going on in the game. And we've played and the game's been part of our lives from 6 years old. And I'm just saying for you, Neil, and yet there's, you really have to know all of it and know that, well, this law is being ignored for this reason and this reason. And that doesn't mean that the game therefore has got wide appeal, because it's too complicated. And so either we decide, well, that's okay. It's a niche sport. We don't want it to blow up to be a huge sport. So let's keep it like this. Or we want to go the other way. And that's for various people to decide the route that rugby should take.
You'll be referring to the law that requires people to enter the ruck with the shoulders above the head.
Yeah, shoulders above the hips, or perhaps like not collapse a ruck, which you do when you judo roll or saddle roll or whatever they want to call it. Deliberately collapse a ruck, deliberately come off your feet, deliberately, all those other things. Yeah, they exist in law, but they don't. So.
And obviously, the game's in abeyance at the moment. Is there going to be a legacy of that? Will it come back the same as it was, or will it sustain lasting damage from this period of suspension?
Well, the first thing that we saw was at the top end in the UK, in the Premiership, we saw after 2 weeks, teams were furloughing players and staff and asking them to take pay cuts. I was after 2 weeks, so it shows you that the sport is hand by mouth. That it relies on weekly gates and TV money and all those sort of things to keep them afloat. And that's not how we want the sport to be. It needs to be on a far stronger footing. It'll be really interesting to see what moves CVC make on all of this. I'm not sure they're in it. They're going to grow the game in the right way. I hope I'm wrong. But I think they're going to have to change the wage structure. For me, I think they need to protect the Premiership. I don't like the word ring fencing. I think you have an expansion type league, so you don't have any relegation, but you can have promotion if clubs meet the desired criteria, and if there's a plan around expansion to a certain amount of teams, and scrap all the other competitions that aren't the main Premiership, and just have Premiership in Europe. Allow all the other players to move around the leagues and play for Championship and lower league stuff so they can get their games. And I think these things they need to have a look at. And the salary cap, I know everyone's had a keen view on, but that also I think is driving salaries up. And I'm not sure it's sustainable. I'm not sure the value meets what the product is. Players are getting paid a lot of money, and the product is not making the same incrementals in profit. And we've allowed the salaries to run away with it ourselves a little bit, and we need to pare that down a bit. I think the glory days of earning all that money across the board are disappearing fast.
Do you think it's important that clubs like Richmond should be able to get into the Premiership?
I think it's case by case. I mean, I'm not sure Richmond are bothered about that. I think they love being a community club. I think Championship is where they'd love to be and stay there. So they've got a high level of rugby, can attract really good players, but those players also want to have jobs. I think it's absolutely right and correct of them to have a semi-pro amateur club where players are only paid on appearances and stuff like this, and it's not their livelihood. I can't see why that can't be a model for nearly all of the Championship. And they have a thriving mini section that on a Sunday is the same as if you go over the road to London Welsh or Teddington or Twickenham or Rosslyn Park, in southwest London. There's so many of them, and again, that's the majority of people playing the sport in the country. So, yeah, I think there's nothing wrong. It's not a lack of ambition. It's actually what they want their club to be and look like. And for Richmond, I think that's, well, we don't want to play in a stand that's in a stadium that's not ours and away from our base. That's not our thing, and I see nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm. And do you see the community game maintaining that, the appeal to children, the amateur game on a Saturday afternoon, the sort of semi-professional game that you knew at Newbury? Is that going to stay, or do you think that's under threat?
I think it is under threat. In the short term, it's under threat. And again, we talked about the coronavirus and the track and trace stuff, and the risk of going and playing for your local team and then getting a message a few days later saying someone in that match has got coronavirus and you've got to self-isolate for 2 weeks. And that means if you're self-employed or you're working, you've suddenly got no income. That risk is large for playing a social game of rugby. So that's a problem in the short term. And in the longer term, we're driving towards a power-based game that's all about size. And if you're a semi-pro player that wants to play on Saturday and then wants to work on Monday, again, that risk reward is going to come into your thoughts because everyone's getting bigger and you're spending more time injured, and that often might mean off work. And that's not fun. So they need to realise that you've got to depower the game to allow it to be played and to thrive at community and age group.
Ben, that's brilliant. Great to chat as always. Thanks very much, and good luck with Rugby X.
Cheers, Neil. Excellent. Thanks a lot for that.